Residents in the Liberty Hill, Ferndale, and Russelldale neighborhoods of North Charleston have been given an opportunity by the South Carolina Department of Transportation to voice their opinions on the future of the I-526 Lowcountry West corridor, which will affect their communities. I talked one-on-one with an advocate for those communities, Jesse Williams, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Jesse Williams, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Quintin. I appreciate everything. Hope you've been doing well.
Yes, sir. Doing great here. Obviously, for many, many years, we've talked on Quintin's Close-Ups about obviously the 526 West corridor and that the expansion. And I know that you've been an extreme advocate for the people of Russelldale, Liberty Hill, and obviously other communities affected near that particular corridor. And they are bracing for changes as the South Carolina Department of Transportation is working on a mitigation plan for the area. How long has this community been actually preparing for this plan?
Quintin, there's been rumors going around for a long time, at least 10 years. But you know how rumors are, everybody just kind of hears things, but they don't get the correct information. So I was invited to a meeting that the DOT had in 2016.
Right.
And at that time, there was really no concrete information out in the community about what's going on. And so I started to learn and attend. But my background that I had to bring to that was being on the Lowcountry Alliance for Model Communities Board, where we in fact had to mitigate concerning the Port Authority expansion and the access roads.
Right.
So it's been a while, but right now I still don't think they have all the right information from the elected officials, and that's unfortunate.
And what is the biggest difference, Jesse, between 2016 and right now when you think of those meetings and communication?
Well, it's you and I, just like everybody else, we're in the community. We're not privy to all of the meetings that goes on, and all we can do is kind of do the best we can to catch this information as it's kind of thrown out.
Sure.
So what happened was that in 2016, they were having some meetings, but they weren't telling people in the neighborhoods anything concrete. They were meeting with selected officials, and they were meeting with business owners in the area. And I just happened upon the time and place of the meeting, and that's how I ended up stumbling across the information. So that's when I started to get information, concerning like maps that people don't get to see normally, timelines and all those kind of things. But it's not unless you're an elected official or invited to some of those meetings that you really know what's going to be happening to your own neighborhood. And that's unfortunate because this has been a long time of this happening, because I heard about the Mark Clark downtown and the P. Clark Parkway, where that parkway literally went through a community. And it just seems to happen over and over and over. And it's still kind of being pushed upon the community now, where the information is not being put out right now, unfortunately.
And I'm going to get to all of those concerns in just a moment, and there might be some feedback here. But let me ask you this. What exactly is the timeline for this? What was the timeline?
So as far as the timeline is concerned, what we've got right now, we had a draft that was put out on October 2020. So a draft was put out where they would draft a potential route for this interstate expansion for 526. And that was October 2020. And then November 2020, they had some public hearings and engagement in November. And then from there, the pandemic came, so everything kind of got slowed down. So when the pandemic came, people weren't able to go to the meetings, but they continued forward with their meetings regardless, despite that fact. And that's what's and so now when I was going on, they had public comments that ended January 15th, 2021.
Right.
So they ended public comments right now at this point, meaning that people can no longer put forth public comments as they were able to before, based on the EIS process, environmental impact study process for environmental justice. So at this point now, what's going on is that they've processed a lot of the comments, and now they can no longer do comments. And in order to effectuate the interstate, what the design is or what it's going to look like, Now it's almost like it's too late. So we're gonna have to see what happens. Now they've got this mitigation process where they're trying to replace homes and all those kind of things. And I'm moving forward. So now, as far as the timeline, so now we're looking at between 2021 and 2023 is the final design, and then acquisitions. They're looking at acquisitions of houses and properties between 2023 and 2027, and then construction between 2027 and 2032. So that's the timeline they're working with right now. The DOT, that is.
And I'm gonna get to all of that in just a minute, but let me ask you this: how many comments were actually sent in to the DOT?
Not a whole lot. I went to a meeting where they had a meeting at the convention center.
Right.
This is back in probably early 2020.
Right.
And they had more DOT and engineers and consultants than they had residents from the community there. So that gives you an idea. In other words, they had about 80 or so employees and less people from the community.
Well, then why wasn't this particular meeting held at, say, at the Russelldale Community Center?
Well, what happened was that I tried to organize the community and brought the neighborhoods together. Russelldale, Ferndale, Russelldale, Liberty, Highland Terrance, Liberty Park, and we worked to bring them together. And then we met for about a year, and then they had some people from the DOT come around with the auspices that they were consultants. So we embraced them and met with them, and they came around, and they essentially saw what we were doing and duplicated that by choosing the people that they wanted on a consulting, they call it CAC, Community Consulting Panel. Right. And so they had a meeting at Highland Terrace where people came from the neighborhood and came over there. Then they had different meetings in different parts of the community. But it was almost like they, in a way, picked and chose who was to come to the table at a certain point.
Are you familiar with any of those folks?
As far as that, so there was one individual that was on the books as a neighborhood president for Russelldale, but he hadn't met in 15 years at least. And so he was chosen to be on that group.
And how recent have they been able to meet with the DOT officials?
Pretty recent. I'm not sure with the pandemic going on. It's hard to tell. They were meeting at a church in Ferndale. Okay. And they had a big meeting a couple times. And so with the pandemic happening, they actually kicked off some people that I knew that was on it, and they actually told them they could no longer attend at a certain point for whatever reason.
Do you have any reasons why they would do that?
Well, historically, as we know, what they've done is that they've got the state entities, the city entities, the county, the councilmen, all these different individuals cohorting together with the businesses, and they almost came to the table kind of having a preset plan in mind. Okay. And so then what they ended up doing was that they would try to reach out to people that has no idea what's going on in those neighborhoods. In other words, I knew another friend who was asked to be on the committee that lived in West Ashley, and he declined to be on that group. So historically, it's almost like we're fighting against history with all this, but we have been able to make some inroads in figuring out this process at least. And so we were able to get some comments in during this process.
Let me ask you a generic question here, Jesse. What exactly is the demographics in and around the corridor?
526?
Yes, sir.
So the neighborhoods that's going to be most impacted as far as houses are concerned is highly an African American demographic. Okay. Highland Terrace, Liberty Park. I'm talking about at least 80% African Americans live in the immediate zone that's impacted. When I say immediate zone, I'm talking about on this map, they've got houses that are in orange, and then they've got houses that are not in orange, and the houses in orange are the houses impacted by this project. And all those houses are African American residents. 100% of this one neighborhood.
One neighborhood. I'm going off track for a little bit, but how many jobs will this expansion, take away?
What?
Yeah, how many jobs do you think this expansion project will actually take away from these neighborhoods?
As far as jobs,
yes,
so
sir.
whenever just to give a comparison, whenever the port was expanding,
Right.
they said that they would hire people from the community around there, and the estimate came out that they probably hired about 8 people from those neighborhoods, as far as who they hired from that community around the Port Authority. There's no guarantee that contracts will be given out to the local people. There's no guarantee of people getting jobs out of this project. As far as job loss, it's largely going to be loss of homes. So homes meaning that they can no longer live near where the jobs are.
Right.
So they're going to have to. People are going to be having to move, to a different part, or basically be displaced.
Did the DOT ever say that they'll have some sort of type of affordable housing options?
Yeah, they've got a plan for that. What they ended up doing was that they're looking at affordable housing. They plan on establishing a housing project that's run by the state of South Carolina. By replacing affordable housing, they said that they're going to construct near the impacted communities, but it's going to be run by the budget of the state. So the state is going to run that project, affordable housing, that is.
And what is the usual budget for affordable housing for the state?
Well, they're looking at in the millions.
Okay.
They want to put forth about 100 to 150 new housing units.
Now, how many single lots within the 4 communities should be made available for affordable housing?
Well, if you look at all the houses that are impacted, you're looking at least 100 units to 150. But in my mind, they've got more than affordable housing. They want to also deal with connectivity, community centers, and parks.
Right.
But there's no replacing really a person's home that they've lived for all their life. Displacement is a big issue. People have to understand the timelines of, for instance, if they're renting and they move at the wrong time, they may not get any compensation if they don't reach out to the right people. So if people don't understand the process and know what their rights are, it's not going to be any replacement for them.
You talked about the DOT, and you talked earlier about history back in the 1960s. What was the compensation for the people who had to move out at that time?
Well, we know that I-26 came through that area. We know that I-26 actually came through and split up Highland Park and Highland Terrance and Liberty Park was split by I-26. So it came through there when I-26 was built. They built 526 around the 1980s, I believe it is. But on a larger scale, they seem to be always targeting those who have less of a voice with these projects, and that's unfortunate because then what you have is more pollution from additional cars coming through. And there are options that they could have used. There's other things they could have done, like public transportation, all different build options they could have utilized. But if they don't have representation speaking up for them, it makes it hard. But that's what we're here for today.
And you obviously talked about pollution and whatnot. Let me ask you this. I know you drive around a lot, but let me ask you, do you know how many total crashes have happened on the 526 East Corridor in the past 3 years?
As far as crashes, the DOT seems to say that there's been a lot of crashes. They say that's like the number one, one of the number one locations for crashes in the state of South Carolina, at that interchange where I-26 and 526 interchanges.
Right.
But what they could have done is make a better design where they're not impacting these homes. They could have increased more public transportation, for instance. They could have put HOV lanes in, designed HOV lanes for carpooling. There are other designs they could have done rather than just looking at just making it wider. This is 2021, so I know they said that's the number one location for crashes in the state. But there's other solutions where the individual's homes aren't necessarily going to be torn down as a result, and also where there's less of a cover-up going on as far as the plans that's coming into place, but that came into place. This information is covered up.
Now, what have you heard thus far?
Well, as far as what I've seen, they do have an office on Rivers Avenue.
Right.
And when you go to that office, they'll try to ask you like what neighborhood you live in. So if you go over there, it's almost like a deterrence in a way, because it's almost like they want to kind of narrow you down or something like that. So it's hard to get information. But I was able to get some information, and they were able to. The recent plan, at least as of March, was that they're not going to have to tear down the Life Changers Covenant Church.
Oh, good.
And that was from some comments that was put in at the corner of 526 and Rivers Avenue.
Right.
And then they've got plans as far as the Russelldale Community Center is going to be lost. They do want to replace the center in Russelldale. And then they've got a lot of houses on I-26 and Highland Terrace that's going to be impacted right now at this point. And that's unfortunate. And I hope people have the information. I hope they do.
And I want to expand on that in just a minute, but let me ask you this. Where are the hot spots for crashes in and around that corridor that they want to expand?
Oh, yeah. One of the biggest spots that they talk about is the interchange from I-26 onto 526 and vice versa. Right. That's essentially the interchange that they've got this project centered around. So because of that, that's why both interstates are impacted. So that's one of the biggest hotspots right there. They say that traffic is backed up on 526 going down to West Ashley and then going down to over to Mount Pleasant. Right. So those are the areas of crashes, of congestion, mainly that interchange. And that's why they wanted to bring this project about, as far as DOT is concerned, from my understanding.
And how many newly constructed units do you anticipate?
Their plan is 150.
Yes, sir. That's right.
Yes, sir.
And
so we're hoping that happens. We're hoping that takes place. They're trying to get land for that reason. So we're hoping for the best. We're going to try to, hopefully we'll track the process. They say that's what they're going to do, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
How should the DOT develop either single-family homes or duplexes or townhomes for those renters that want to move to home ownership?
Yep. So the plan that they have right now, as far as the community is concerned, I would recommend that they go into a community land trust scenario where they have a land trust owned by the community, so that the homes can be cheaper. What they're gonna start off by having the dollars funneled through the state of South Carolina's housing program, and then what they're trying to do is buy land in and around that area, and apartments in and around that area. And they literally want to build new units around those neighborhoods: Russelldale, Liberty Park, Highland Terrace, Ferndale. I hope it does not contribute to higher costs of housing, because it's high enough right now for people. And so I hope that they can keep the costs low for people as far as rent's concerned.
What is the average rent in those neighborhoods?
The rent is going up. It's going up. So I don't know what exactly the average is, but it's going up quick. People can't afford to, if you're looking for a basic 1 to 3 unit house, if you want a 3-bedroom home, you're looking at least $1,000. At least $1,000.
Well, then, what is the average home price in those neighborhoods?
If you look at the Whalen and all those areas, we have to look at these statistics. I haven't looked at the stats lately, but those are going up as well. It's hard to find a home that's newly built that's for less than $90,000 to $100,000.
Wow.
People are making an average. People are in poverty in North Charleston, in poverty rates, and they're making low wages. They're working jobs $12 an hour. They're not even at $15 an hour. So after taxes, after they're paying the taxes, they're taking home, $300 to $400 a week. That equates to about $1,200 to $1,600 a month.
Right.
Paying rent of $1,000, you only left with $600 for the whole month. That's tough.
What is the property rate in those areas, as you know it?
They haven't done statistics on those specific neighborhoods. Okay. But if you were to look at the city of North Charleston, they're still hovering around 33%. 1/3 of the city of North Charleston is in poverty. And we know where those areas lie. That's the southern end in North Charleston. So that includes these communities that are all considered the southern end. Right. So, you're looking at least 33% of the whole city of North Charleston, and in a big city like that, that's a lot of people.
And how many homes did the Department of Transportation take away in the 1960s?
In the 1960s, I know that if you look at downtown, I know that the 526 was built. I-26 was built before 526 was put in, obviously.
Right.
It's hard to know the number of homes. You have to look at the historical data. I looked around a little bit at the history. I reached out to some people at the College of Charleston Avery Institute.
Right.
And they have a lot of information at the Avery Institute about homes impacted at the September Police Parkway downtown.
Right.
So if you were to look around that parkway and just look to the right and left, you see all those areas right there. There were homes impacted. So that it's a good bit.
Now, theoretically, if the Department of Transportation does not take away these homes, what should they do to help restore these communities?
Well, if you look at if less homes are impacted, they do have plans for dealing with things like traffic impact. When you have more cars driving on an interstate, with the widening, less homes will be impacted. If they can impact less homes, they still have a plan to replace some of the community centers. They are going to look at bike connectivity, jobs programs, okay, and those sorts. But as it stands now, they do have a plan right now that it likely will not change too much, where a good bit of homes are impacted in the area.
Now, what type of jobs do they need in Ferndale, Liberty Hill, the Wayland?
They need to have better access to jobs. We've got to have less discrimination going on. First of all, so there are manufacturing jobs in North Charleston. You're talking about Boeing, Bosch, Volvo, Mercedes, all those jobs. People get jobs as longshoremen in the community. Transportation logistics, that's coming up. That should be available for people. I'm talking about all the jobs you see around here. That should be available to the Wayland residents, Highland Terrace residents, Liberty Park residents. But a big problem is the discrimination that goes on, and that's a fact. That's a factor we're dealing with in 2021. We're still dealing with those factors.
And what exactly are those factors in those communities?
Well, first of all, we have to look at the education that's available. You have schools that the residents that they go to, the high schoolers are going to, failing schools, lower education, less accessibility to college. So it's a trickle effect. And so I've actually dealt and looked at the educational problems in the Charleston County area in a good bit. And for instance, closing Garrett. Garrett was in the Wayland, in Dorchester Wayland, Garrett High School. And they had upwards of 13 trades. They were accessing these trades. And so they need those kind of opportunities to continue. But what happened was that those opportunities were in fact gotten rid of. They closed the school. You know what I mean? We're going backwards and not forward. And that's the problem. So now they can't get access to the jobs because they were lacking the training and the education. So now we have a system, school to prison pipeline going on.
How do you hope the Charleston County School District works with the DOT on this expansion project?
Well, I was able to communicate with the school district a couple years ago concerning how they can actually have programs where the children can get access to transportation jobs. So here's a perfect example. You have the port expanding, where they're going to have forklift operator jobs, logistics jobs, and those sorts through the port. So now, I was able to communicate with the CCSD, and they actually have a logistics and transportation program at the new Center for Advanced Studies.
Right.
Now, kids will have that opportunity if they're able to take advantage of the opportunity. They'll be able to get trained, and the hope is that they get connected to those jobs. So as far as education with the DOT. It's about communicating what jobs are going to be available and coming out through the pipeline. The good jobs. They need to be able to have access not just to painting streets, not just painting the roads, not just digging a ditch, but the better jobs. construction management jobs, for instance. That's the kind of jobs that the residents should have access to.
And what else should they have access to, like grocery stores?
On the southern end, yeah, I know that's been an issue on the southern end. Good nutritional grocery stores is a big need. These solutions don't come without people speaking up and fighting. They should have access to justice. They should be able to get outside of their homes and drive down the street, walk down the street, and not be discriminated upon. So there's a lot of problems, And the other day I was thinking, Quintin, and I was thinking about just how we have to have more people that are willing to tell the truth and hold truth to power. And that's what we need. That's what's going to bring better change. So a lot of this information is covered up, whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking about the DOT 526 project, whether we're talking about school closures, job accessibility. This stuff is covered up, and it's across the gamut. Elected officials are responsible. The government leaders are responsible. We all should take a little bit of responsibility as a community in order to make this community better. So that's what we need.
Who do you hold responsible in the city of North Charleston?
Depends on what issue we're talking about, right? The mayor of North Charleston is over the whole city of North Charleston, and that's what we have to look at. We have to look at our leaders, and we have to look at where what issue we're speaking to, in order to show who's responsible for these issues, and who can help with these issues. So it's about finding solutions rather than scapegoating the problem. So if we're looking at big major issues in a city, we have to look at the mayor. If we're looking at major issues in the school district in North Charleston, within the schools in North Charleston, we have to look at the superintendent. We have to look at the school board. We have to look at North Charleston City Council.
What does environmental justice look like to you?
Environmental justice, it looks like actually making the community a better place when communities are impacted. If in fact injustice is being done, like a interstate coming through a community and widening, we need to have measures in place that's actually going to include the community members and have better transparency. So environmental justice to me looks like a transparent process that leads to a transparent result. So if we don't have a transparent process, in other words, people know what's happening, they're getting the word, they're not being pushed out of a meeting, then we can then have a transparent result. We were part of this process. Now we see these things going on. That's what it would look like.
Is the city of North Charleston transparent with the residents of Russelldale, Ferndale, the Liberty Hill area?
I don't think so. I don't think they're being transparent. We need better transparency. I don't think they've been transparent from the start of this process. That's why there's so many rumors out there in the neighborhood, about what's going to be going on. They've got the office off Rivers Avenue, and I don't know how many people know about that office. And I think that's what a city should be about. That's what local elected leaders should be about. Is getting the information to people, and it's not. I don't believe it's getting to the people.
And speaking of the people, Justin, let me ask you this: how will this particular change affect the health and the quality of life in that area?
Well, for one thing, we have to look at a holistic aspect. We're looking at health and quality of life. We have to look at keeping a neighborhood together. When you continue to split up streets and communities, you look at people's lives impacted. Senior citizens, they've lived there for a long time. So they're going to be impacted in so many different ways, not just the environmental pollution aspect. We're talking about noise
Right.
pollution.
Right.
We're talking about seismic impacts, rattling that goes on. So if you're right next to this expansion or this project, your house may be a little bit down, but there may be vibrations that tears at your foundation of your home. So those are a lot of kinds of impact. Also, just the human impact, just the psychological impact. People just being in limbo, is a big problem. So.
And where exactly are the traffic noise levels in those areas?
Right at the immediate right by the interstate, right next to the interstate, whether it's 526 or I-26. I know currently right now there's houses next to the existing interstate. So right next to it, you hear the noise. Actually, like if you were to look at, I've walked these streets a lot over the past couple of years. If you were to look at, let's say, for example, Good Street in Highland, I think it's Highland Terrace.
Right.
Some of the houses are like right next to the interstate. So like you go outside the door, you look outside, you see all the cars zooming by, right outside your door. So when that expands, the houses that are right next to it now is going to be impacted, and then the houses down will be right next to the pollution and the cars.
Has anybody ever asked for any sound barriers?
Yeah, that was in the communications. That should happen. I do believe we put comments in for sound barriers. Okay. But last I heard, the DOT was not amenable to sound barriers over there. That's not on their list of mitigation. They might plant bushes or something like that, but I don't think they wanted to do a wall. From last I heard, but we got to continue to ask.
And do they have the money for the sound barriers?
Yeah, I believe they do. Yeah, they have the money for it. Yeah.
And what are the new commercial developments and transportation projects that you're keeping your eye on?
As far as commercial developments, we have to watch the Port Authority expansion, and we have all these businesses that's coming around the port. That's going to be growing around the port as a result of supporting the port expansion. There are developments across the whole city of North Charleston, and one thing that I noticed lately are these schools. And what happens when a school closes? What they'll try to do is make that a commercial area. In other words, a business would utilize that space. So we have to keep an eye on that. Transitioning schools to commercialization. It's done kind of under the radar. For instance, if you look at the Old Shakur Elementary, right. What's that going to become? I heard they're going to have a call center there. We'll have to see. So we have to keep an eye on those kind of things. Public goods, public properties being transitioned into those kind of deal makings. We have to watch it.
Now, has the old Garrett area turned it into a commercialized area?
Garrett Academy?
Yes, sir.
Not at this point. Okay. Not yet. I know there's a railroad track right behind it. So people were saying that the railroad was wanting to use that space. At this point, it's basically a vacant school. They may have a charter school using it, but we'll see. We have to watch it over time. So unfortunately, we having to watch these processes take place. So the new CAS building is open up now. Okay. I don't think a whole lot of students are attending those programs at this point.
And what is the communication like between the city of North Charleston and the DOT officials on this project?
We'd have to ask the city. We'd have to ask the mayor of North Charleston. We'd have to ask the city councilmen. Okay. Those 10 city councilmen. Because the DOT actually try to rely on those elected representatives to communicate with them. So we'd have to see if we're not hearing anything from from the mayor or from the council. Either they are trying to cover up what's actually happening, or they're not talking to them. One of the two.
Jesse Williams, thank you so much for your time, and again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Quintin. You have a good day. Thank you.
Likewise.